The Travels and Adventures of Little Baron Trump and His Wonderful Dog Bulger. Chapter 6, Part 1. Upon my return from my first journey to faraway lands, the elder baron and his faithful spouse, my beloved mother, followed by all the retainers of the household, met Bulger and me at the outer gate and welcomed us home with that wild and boisterous joy which only German hearts are capable of. The elder baron threw his arms around my neck and, forgetful of the fact that I was only half his size, lifted me completely off the ground in the unreasonable joy of a father's heart, nearly throttling me. I kicked vigorously, but the soft felt soles of my oriental shoes prevented me from giving him to understand that he was fast choking me to death. At last, my thoughtful mother noticed that I was growing black in the face, and laying hold of my legs, pulled me downward out of the dangerous embrace in which the elder baron had wrapped me. Not, however, until my father's Nuremberg egg had bored painfully into my protuberant brow, adding another bump to that already bumpy territory. Upon noticing which, the elder baron dispatched an attendant to his apartment with orders to search his medicine chest for a bottle of volatile liniment. In his eagerness to undo the harm he had inflicted, he poured a stream of acrid liquid into my eyes, causing me intense suffering. This red and inflamed condition of my eyes, however, the tenants and retainers attributed to my emotion upon entering the baronial hall once more, after so long an absence. I didn't regret this little incident at all, for while I am opposed to that ready-made style of emotion which some people always keep on hand, I have no objections to a noble and dignified use of tears. It is needless to say that everybody was delighted to see Bulger. They all found that he had increased in size, beauty, and intelligence. He received all this homage with a dignity that was charming to behold. To impress the crowd with a due sense of that discipline and self-control which he acquired as the constant companion and confidant of his master, he absolutely refused to touch the many tidbits and dainty morsels which the retainers offered him, and gazed with the utmost indifference at the other dogs in their mad and scramblings for the food which he had declined. I was very proud of him. In a few days, everything had settled down to its wonted quiet again beneath the baronial roof. Evenings I passed giving accounts of the many wonderful things I had seen while abroad. To these settings, a few of the older and more confidential household servants were admitted. My good mother arranged them in a semicircle behind the chairs of the elder baron and his guests. I, with Bulger at my side, occupied a dais, either seated by the side of a table, holding my curiosities, or standing in front of my auditors in an easy position, while I held them spellbound by my narration. There was one thing that worried me, and it was this: how will the elder baron receive the announcement of my intention to leave home again ere many moons? To my great surprise and delight, he didn't even wait for me to make known my intentions. While seated in my library one day, poring over a very rare book of travels which I had just purchased, a gentle tap at the door caused Bulger to raise his head and give a low growl. "Come in," said I. It was the elder baron. "I disturb you," he began. "You have that right, baron," I replied with a gracious smile. "Be seated, pray." And saying this, I arranged the pelt of my very beautiful and rare animal which I had killed while abroad, so as to make a comfortable seat for the elder baron on the canopy. "My son," said the baron, "I come to bring me this little token from our gracious master, the emperor." I looked up. He held in his hand the insignia of the Grand Cross of the Crimson Censure. I laid the bauble on the table. "Little baron," continued my father, "I am well pleased with thee." I made a low obeisance. "Thy marvelous adventures fill all mouths. Thou hast set a new luster on the family name, and I come to rouse thee from thy apparent sloth. Thou must be up and doing. Thou must shake off this indolence, which will gain an increased power over thee each passing hour. New triumphs await thee. Go forth once more. Turn aside out of the beaten paths. Seek the wonderful and marvelous. But ere thou settest forth, ponder the contents of this parchment roll. Many years ago, when the down of manhood first came upon my cheek, and before life's burdens had come to lie heavily on my soul, I found it in the damp and noisome vaults of an ancient Roman convent, which the pestilential air of an encroaching marsh had emptied of its inmates. It may turn thy footsteps towards something strange and interesting. Concealing with difficulty the joy occasioned by my father's words and my earnestness to know the contents of the parchment roll, I returned the elder baron's salutation with marked respect, and he withdrew. I need not assure the reader of the almost breathless anxiety with which I unrolled the volume. It was in the Latin tongue, and was the work of a scribe. The ink had faded somewhat, but even in places where it had entirely disappeared, I could by the aid of a strong lens readily trace out the words by the lines scratched into the parchment by the point of the reed pen. It was a copy of an ancient Roman newspaper, or Acta Diurna, and bore a date corresponding to our 45th year before the present era. Caesar was at the height of his power. Peace reigned and arts flourished. Rome was the center of the world, was the home of a glory and magnificence far beyond anything the eyes of man had yet gazed upon. The contents of this copy of the Acta Diurna was largely made up of detailed accounts of a famous trial just completed at Rome, in which 7 noted sculptors had been found guilty of poisoning a beautiful maid named Paula, after they had each completed a statue of her, in order that no other sculpture should ever be able to make use of her for the same purpose. The judges had pronounced the sentence of death upon them, but in consideration of their splendid services in beautifying the imperial city, Caesar had changed their punishment from death to lifelong exile. The 7 sculptors had been transported in an imperial galley to a faraway island in the southern seas. As stated in this copy of the Acta Diurna, it was the most remote piece of land belonging to the Roman Empire, lying to the southward. Ad insulae remotissimam imperii Romani Medianorium. As an additional act of the imperial clemency, the wives and children of the condemned sculptors had been graciously accorded permission to follow their husbands and fathers into their terrible exile. When I had first finished reading all the minute details of this strange crime and its awful results, I found that my blood was coursing through my veins with a mad violence. I paced the floor with such a quick and nervous step, and with agitation so plainly visible in my looks, that I was aroused from my reverie by the anxious whining of Bulger, who was following me about the room close upon my heels. Why not go in quest of this faraway isle to which these 7 sculptors and their families were transported by the command of great Caesar? Perchance in that far distant isle dwells a race of beings who, forgetting the world and forgotten by it, will, by their strange habits and peculiar customs, so interest me as to repay me for all the dangers I may run in crossing untracked seas and turning aside from ocean paths. Perchance their descendants may be living yet. This idea took possession of my whole being. Sleep was impossible. Far into the night, I pored over ancient charts. While deepest silence enwrapped the baronial halls, I worked out in my mind, or rather let my mind work out, the course which I should pursue. For it was always a custom of mine never to attempt to solve the unsolvable. In fact, I early made the discovery that any interference on my part with the mysterious workings of my mind tended rather to impede its actions. So I waited calmly for light. It came at last. Closing my eyes with my inner sight, I could see a map of the Eastern world traced in glowing, shimmering lines upon an inky background. And there, too, I could see my course marked out in dotted lines of fire. With a loud, ringing cry of joy, I sprang to my feet and exclaimed, "I shall find this wonderful isle. I shall unlock the portals of the southern seas. I shall gaze upon the descendants of Paula's murderers." Come, Bulger, away, away! Hastily bidding adieu to my parents, I swung myself into the saddle, and with Bulger securely strapped in croup, dashed madly away towards the shores of the Mediterranean. The Baron's mad son is off again, cried the peasants as I galloped past their farmhouses. In 3 days, I stood upon the deck of my vessel. In obedience to my orders, the captain's hand literally rested upon the helm. All that day, he had been standing with his eyes riveted upon the shore, for something told him I could not be far away. Everything was in readiness, even to the last biscuit. As Bulger and I leaped over the rail, my good ship rounded to the wind and darted away like a thing of life. The blood tingled in my veins at sight of the blue waves and white-bellied sails. Bulger gave vent to his satisfaction in mad gambols and ear-piercing barks. It was certainly an auspicious beginning. Leaving the command of the ship to the mate, the captain joined me in the cabin, where I unfolded to him my project of sailing in the southern seas in quest of a long-forgotten island. He made haste to unroll his chart and adjust his spectacles in order to fix the location of the island when I should give him the latitude and longitude. Fancy his almost consternation when I told him that the only proof I had of the existence of such an island was the brief mention in the ancient Roman newspaper. Was I mad? Did I care no more for life than to throw it away at such a foolhardy undertaking? Had I no idea of the rage of the terrible typhoon, the treachery of the hidden reef, the weight of the watery mountains which would topple on our deck? Could I expect seamen to go where there was no record that the most adventurous sailors of past centuries had ever plowed the water? I smiled. Master, said I after a moment's silence, this ship is mine, and you have sworn to serve me like a true seaman. But if your courage has failed you, you shall be put ashore at the first port we make. Go. Nay, little Baron, cried the skipper. I was only testing your resolution. If you have the courage to sail into unknown seas, I have the courage to follow you, come bright skies and calm waters, or come storm clouds and thunderbolts. I shook the old man's hand and bade him go on deck, for at last sleep had come to my wakeful eyes. The first time in 3 whole weeks, and I wanted to be alone. In a few days, we passed the Straits of Gibraltar and turned southward, keeping the African coast in sight. I passed my time perfecting myself in the Latin language, and often called forth very vigorous protestations from Bulger by addressing him in that tongue, and making use of him as a sort of audience before which I delivered my speeches, after I had rounded them and polished them. The only stops we made now were for water or provisions. By daylight and starlight, my staunch ship bounded along on her course as if some friendly Nereids were pushing at her stern. In the long watches of the night, I lay in my hammock and pictured to myself that Roman galley as it bore those 7 exiles with kith and kin away from their beloved land forever. Ere another moon had bent her crescent in the evening sky, we had reached the Cape and came to anchor with intent to overhaul our ship most thoroughly before going further southward. This occupied several days. I chafed under the delay. And we're going to pause here, and we'll continue with this chapter in the next video. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Thanks so much for watching. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.